Okay, I hope everyone's here. I hope everyone's as excited as I am for Layer 2 Amsterdam. My name's Peter. I'm going to be your MC for today, and I'm also the co-founder of L2Beat. And after giving all of you a very big thank you for coming here today, I want to welcome our first speaker. He's going to give a keynote. It's Dankrad Feist from the Ethereum Foundation.
Thank you. Does it work? Hello? Yep. Yeah, welcome everyone to this great event. So, I want to talk about scalable blockchains. Sharding has been proposed a long time ago. I found references all the way back to 2013. 9 years later, well, when will it actually happen? Here's another thing that we have been proposed for like 100 years. Flying cars. When will they happen? I mean, it turns out you can actually kind of have a flying car nowadays, but it probably looks a bit different to what you were expecting. And the reason that this is probably not as amazing as you might think is that with a flying car, you have this fundamental dilemma, the trade-off between the performance in air and the performance on the road. And for one of them, you want these large airfoils so that they can keep you in the air, and in the other case, they're just in the way. Like, you need to do something, and they're just very big. For blockchains, we have a kind of similar dilemma. Well, it's actually a trilemma. It's been proposed by Vitalik Buterin many years ago, and it basically says it's hard to have a blockchain that unites these three properties: scalability, security, and decentralization. Scalability means that it can process a large number of transactions. Security is kind of obvious, like you want your transactions to be irreversible, and you don't want someone to be able to introduce invalid transactions into the chain. And decentralization is a bit more fuzzy. It's about the cost of running a full node of that chain. And why would you care? Well, because that's the only way we get the properties that we actually want from blockchains and not centralized services. So that's how we get censorship resistance, for example. And so the scalability trilemma is often misunderstood. People think it means you must sacrifice one, like I've seen this repeated many times. But actually, we do know how to solve it. It's not actually like strictly a trilemma anymore. It's a trilemma in the sense that it is hard to unify these properties, but it is not impossible. And the way to do it is by separating consensus and execution. We need to relieve the full nodes from the burden of executing all transactions. And we need to introduce scalable data availability and fraud proofs or validity proofs in order to do this. Some years ago, the Ethereum roadmap specified that the way we're going to do this would be through execution sharding. So this is a way where we split up the transactions into many different shards, and also split up the state into these shards, the state into these shards, and they would all execute independently. They would basically be their own little blockchains, but with a property that they can communicate securely, and they're all secured by the same consensus mechanism, and thus share security. However, it turns out that has one big downside. This loses composability, and that's something that Ethereum developers have really come to love over the years, that you can directly compose different contracts and basically use these, for example, DeFi Legos, like do a flash loan and go through many different exchanges and all this sort of stuff. And then some years ago about came a new idea, which is data sharding. And data sharding is different from execution sharding in that what the Ethereum chain does, or what the L1 does, is basically only providing this data layer that makes sure that some data that needs to be published is publicly available to anyone who wants to download it. And on these data shards, we can have a construction that's called rollups, and rollups provide the execution on top of data. However, there's a big difference compared to execution sharding, which is that a rollup is not constrained to one of these shards. A rollup can use as many or as few of these shards as it wants in order to publish its data, and internally it can still maintain full composability. So that's why at some point in 2019, the Ethereum community decided that probably execution sharding is not the way to go anymore. The way to scale is data sharding and rollups. The Ethereum rollup-centric roadmap separated the base layer concerns and the rollup concerns. The base layer's responsibilities are now to provide massive data availability, to provide security, and to make sure that it's decentralized and can thus provide censorship resistance. Whereas rollups can focus on execution itself and on the mechanism to ensure that this execution is valid, which are either validity proofs or fraud proofs. And we have come a long way here. So, I mean, it's amazing. Like, we're definitely not at zero in terms of rollups. We have several of these deployed. They have large amounts of value in them now. So this is great. This is amazing progress on this already. But how do we get a flying car? What I would say is a flying car in blockchain terms, for me, is an execution layer that actually supports something like 10,000 TPS. I mean, the exact number is maybe not that important, but a very large number of TPS that can support a significant amount of the world's financial activity. It should not have any compromises in terms of security decentralization, and it should have full smart contract capabilities. For example, this doesn't have to be, but like I think one great achievement and one way to measure this would be to make it fully EVM binary compatible, because that's the way many smart contracts are written now. And of course, inside these 10,000 TPS, it should be fully composable. Okay, what does that mean to have 10,000 TPS for an EVM compatible rollup? This means that it needs to support something like 210 million gas per second, or 2.5 billion gas per block, which is every 12 seconds. That's about 168 times what the current Ethereum L1 provides. In terms of data availability, that means, so currently, like a current Ethereum block, when you look at the statistics, it's about 80 kilobytes per block, give or take, just an average. So the total of making that amount of data available would be about 13.4 megabytes per block. This is actually supported by our sharding roadmap, because full sharding is supposed to provide 16 megabytes per block when it's rolled out. This is without any sort of compression techniques or anything, so I fully expect that when we get to the 10,000 TPS, we won't just be able to support one of these rollups, but many of them. So great. Data availability, we can get there. The question is, when will we finally get this cheap data? That's certainly something you all want to know. So here's a rough overview of what to expect over the next 1, 2, 3 years. Step 1, we need to get the merge. Sorry, this does not give any data availability, but it's just the blocker for getting anything else done for now in Ethereum. So we need to get that out of the way as soon as possible. After the merge, the next planned hard fork is currently the Shanghai hard fork, and it looks good that we might get an EIP in that's called EIP 4844, which will give some extra data that rollups can use. And the next step after that will be full sharding. However, I'm not going to give any concrete time estimates, but these are the 3 steps. These are the highest priority for the Ethereum L1 at the moment, so I think they will get done over the next years. So 4844 is an EIP that introduces shard blob transactions. It will introduce about 1 megabytes of additional data per block, so that gives you 83 kilobytes per second. It is not a scalable solution, so that means that for now, all Ethereum full nodes will still have to download all of this data. But the format will be exactly as what we will do for full sharding. So you'll get cheaper data, and if you support this as a rollup, the nice thing is you will not need any further upgrades when full sharding comes around. So I highly recommend you all, if you haven't done so yet, you all learn about KZG commitments now, because that's how the data will be committed to, and so they will be useful for you. Full sharding with data availability sampling is going to support 16 megabytes per block, and it will finally be scalable. So at that point, we will support full nodes that will have a much lower requirements than downloading these 16 megabytes every block, and this will become the highest priority after the Shanghai hard fork. Currently, just to give you an overview, there are still some challenges with that. So in terms of engineering challenges, there's one where we need to compute all the encoding and the proofs for this data. However, this I fully expect to be solved well in time. There are still some research challenges that are, I guess, a little bit more open. I am optimistic that we will get that done, but the one big question that is still kind of at the back of our minds is how to distribute samples robustly. Basically, right now, it is not at least well known how to make a distributed hash table. That would be the storage element in order to store data availability samples, how to make that DOS resistant. Cool, so that is the data availability part in order to support the 10,000 TPS. What does it mean for an EVM rollup that needs to support 10,000 TPS? So we need to talk about proofs, we need to talk about execution, light clients, and also escape hatches. So in terms of proofs, if you're designing an optimistic rollup, then either it's a single round, then you probably just need to add more checkpoints, or it's a multi-round rollup, and that basically means adding more rounds to support a large number of transactions. So in a way, your life is probably relatively easy in terms of proving if you want to achieve a higher number of TPS. For a ZK rollup, that might be a bit harder, like the work might be a bit harder. You need to work a lot harder on parallelization, and you probably need to step up your game on hardware acceleration as well. So you might, if you don't have it yet, you might need to introduce it. You probably have done something, and then you might need to upgrade whatever you're doing. An interesting question is maybe there is actually a combination where the best of both worlds is an ZK rollup with an optimistic tip. That is the case if provers have a high latency, but an optimistic tip you can still get fast confirmation for light clients of this rollup. One thing we will need to achieve is probably parallel execution, because right now block processing takes about 200 milliseconds on the Ethereum main chain. And if we scale that by 168 times, we get over 33 seconds. So that's not doable anymore in a single slot. So I think if we want to achieve 10,000 TPS in a rollup, we need to start thinking about parallelizing execution now. It will not just be like, clearly you can parallelize the proof, but you also need to parallelize the execution so that you will be able to actually compute all the state updates that you need. So probably think about things like access lists and potentially gas pricing per account in order to be able to actually sort all the transactions accordingly. So clearly what we don't want is that your rollup full node is going to look like this. So we need to talk about light clients. If rollup users have to run this kind of node in order to follow their rollup, then we're basically back to data center chains, now at the rollup level, like Solana and EOS. So a rollup that supports this scale of execution will need fully trustless light clients. In this case, it will actually be the ZK rollups that have it easy. It's much easier to design a ZK rollup light client. For optimistic rollups, there will probably be some hard work in order to create a fraud-proofing system, not just the one that can currently already be executed on the Ethereum chain using the EVM, but we also need one that can be done just on the peer-to-peer network so that light clients can securely determine what the correct head of the chain is. Finally, escape hatches. So at 10,000 TPS, exiting to an L1 is not necessarily a realistic proposal anymore. If the operator starts working against a significant number of the users, then there's just not enough space on L1 to escape to that. So we need to think about how we can exit to rollups. And we also need to think about how to scale our forced inclusion. Forced inclusion via a separate L1 transaction is also not enough to provide censorship resistance, because someone could be censoring 1,000 transactions per second, and then it's going to be difficult to include those on L1. So we need to think about forced inclusion from the data availability layer as well. And one thing that I'm very excited about with rollups is that one part where Ethereum has struggled so far is or actually, I wouldn't just say Ethereum, all blockchains have struggled, is in terms of business development. We have lots of speculation. We have relatively little real-world usage that provides value. So there's still the quest for what is the blockchain killer app. I mean, there is one obvious answer to this, potentially. Like something that we will have finally with rollups. We already have decentralized stablecoins on Ethereum, and we will have a massive scalable payments layer. I think the payments market, as an example, is still enormous and up for grabs. It is a traditional network problem, so it's hard. But crypto has developed unique ways to deal with this. So I think it will be an interesting challenge, and I really hope to see lots of innovative approaches in terms of business developments from rollups. And I think that's one of the great things about the rollup roadmap, that we have now all these different teams that can work on their own and think about what is the best way to find their niche, and how can they start finding real-world usage for crypto. So we have new Ethereum-aligned protocols. Each of them has potentially, or some of them at least, have their own token, and that can matter. Like, I think you can do interesting things with tokens. And yeah, we need to grow crypto in a sustainable way. So we will need to look out for the use cases that really create social value. And I think the first question to always ask when you do this is, does your use case just redistribute the pie, or does it grow the pie? And then look for the latter. We also need to talk about governance. So this, I hope, we will not see that much in crypto. Whatever you think of this particular offer, which may be good, may be bad, but in principle, it is a dangerous thing if like every protocol, every company basically has a backdoor, a front door, and a back door. Here is an interesting analysis that basically saying you can buy advertisements on Twitter, or if you want it at very large scale, then you can just buy Twitter, and maybe the latter is a better proposal. And we have this problem a lot in crypto as well. I mean, I was very surprised when I first saw this, that there was no attempt to hide what this is. So yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, governance, well, is hard for all crypto protocols, but it will be particularly interesting for rollups, and I really hope that we'll come to more sustainable solutions, and we will realize that bribing is bad and is not like an acceptable way to execute governance. So governance tokens have many pitfalls. If all governance can just be bought, that is dystopian. So we need to value the user choice over investors. We need to, for example, make sure that that when there's changes in the governance, when there's any new decisions, users always have a chance to exit the system, and users do not, and the governance is not used to coerce users into doing things or essentially steal value. And by the way, projecting the majority of users is not good enough. It can easily be that a majority makes a bad decision and coerces a minority into doing something. So we need mechanisms that protect both majorities and minorities. Yeah, so basically I'm here to, I mean, clearly we have a lot to do on our L1 side, but I want to give you this on your way as the rollup development teams. Clearly you already have a lot of things to do, and this is not like the complete list. I know there are like things higher up, but these are the systems where I feel like this is something that we also need to start working on now, so that we can get to the 10,000 TPS and we can get scalable, fully composable execution chains. Thank you.